Pete Wargent, mate, how are you?
I'm really good, thanks, mate. It's good to be on, and thanks. It's great to be a guest on your treasured podcast.
No, it's always my pleasure, mate. You're one of my favorites in the industry, and I love sort of having a chat about property with you. You're always got some great insights and chucking around some content and some graphs and charts, which I always enjoy going through. So it's absolutely my pleasure to have you on, mate. I guess the real emphasis of today is just getting, and I know we've had this discussion before in other podcasts, but your own sort of personal philosophy around building a portfolio and what that sort of long-term vision looks like, and then some of the things or mistakes you'd go back and do if you could, and get some insight around how that all looks. But I guess to get us started, what would you say your own philosophy on building a portfolio out is over the long term?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to property, I mean, I suppose in the end, there's three different ways to build wealth, and there's, ideally you should have a balance of all of them. I think when and that's obviously real estate, and then stocks or shares, and business. I think when it comes to property, my philosophy has always been, for me anyway, I think the process of buying and selling property is quite clunky and it's quite costly. So my view has always been with property, try and take a long-term view and just basically try and build the snowball, let the results compound over time. And if you're taking that long sort of 30, 50-year view, of course, you're going to have ups and downs and cycles. But if you're buying the best locations you can afford, and you just try and drown out the day-to-day media noise, of which there's plenty, and just keep on building that snowball over time. And there'll always be people saying, oh, you should be doing this or that or the other, but you'll generally find if you buy well, the long-term results will be really good. So try and turn down the day-to-day noise if you can.
Yeah, that's a great response, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that kind of go, we'll go for the foundational growth assets first, and then sort of transition into a passive income source. Is there any point where you feel as you're growing out the portfolio, you transition into something a little bit more cash flow, or would you always sort of stick to those fundamentals?
For us anyway, the most recent properties we've bought have been commercial, so that is a tilt, I guess, towards a more income-focused strategy. But that's largely just a cash flow thing. I do think probably the best overall risk-adjusted returns for most people would come from residential property. I think it's just a lot easier to understand. Plus, you can use a bit more leverage if you want to, and it's just less risk in many ways if you're buying well in residential. So the most recent stuff we've bought has been farmland and industrial. But look, I think for most people starting out, residential is probably an easier way to go.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. If you could go back to young accountant Pete when you first started building out your portfolio, what would you go back and tell yourself if you sort of had a blank canvas?
Well, except for don't be an accountant, you mean? Oh, look, I think, there's a couple of different ways to answer that. I mean, I think, with the benefit of hindsight, you can always say, oh, well, I should have done this, and, I should have bought this cryptocurrency in 2013 or whatever. There's loads of different things you could do. I think for me, I think, on the property side of things, I've always tried to buy in the best location I could afford at any given point in time. So, sometimes I would have loved to have bought, a big house on a big block, but the budget didn't allow at that point. So I don't have too many regrets in terms of the strategies we've taken. I think I would probably take an interest sooner, get started sooner. I would also, I often say this, if I had my time again, I would either start a landscaping or gardening business as soon as I could, or learn a trade. I think learn to be a builder or something. But I think a lot of this is hypothetical, and certainly don't have any regrets about being an accountant, because the skill sets that you learn in terms of reading financials and understanding investing and numbers are quite invaluable. But I sometimes fantasize about, well, if I was 18 again, maybe I would do something differently. But I think actually part of the challenge was I just wasn't that confident when I was 18, 19, 20 to go out and do my own thing. So I think a lot of it is maybe hindsight bias.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm sure some of that skill set has been able to leverage you into the multiple businesses that you've started and what you're doing today. So it's much of a muchness. It's kind of just what you would want to spend your day doing every day. And, that landscaping I love landscaping design too. Like I find that super interesting. And you touched on a really good point there about saying, buying the best locations that you can afford. And I think that afford part is often gets misinterpreted or unrecognized. I think it's common. Like I know when I was first starting to build out my portfolio, I thought, well, I really want to buy a good foundation asset, but I can't afford to do so. And so it's still okay to buy in those, in different locations, but buy the best area that you can afford at that point in time. I think you're spot on. If there's anything about your personal portfolio, you don't have to go into too much detail or anything like that, but would you change anything about it? Or do you feel like you've made, a big mistake that others could learn from?
I don't think, well, we haven't sort of had any sort of real dud performing properties. I think it goes back to the previous point. I think if there were certain points in time where literally all of the borrowing capacity we had would only allow to buy, 1-bedroom units in the places we were looking, places like Sydney. So, obviously, if the budget was higher, I would have been buying houses, whatever, but that just wasn't the situation where we're in at that point in time. I think, we've bought properties where there have been some issues. I think we had one issue, place we bought in Geelong had an issue with the roof. And obviously, the last thing you want to get when you buy a property is a roof problem. And there was some repair costs there. We've also bought properties where there have been special levies in the past. So there's little things like that, which obviously you would rather not have. But I mean, overall, we haven't had properties that have been a major opportunity cost or anything like that. So I guess in the end, that's all you can ask. Things won't go perfectly, but overall, I guess because we've tried to focus on, places where the land value will go up over the decades, the results have been pretty kind overall.
Yeah, and I guess that's why the farmland play that you've gone through as well, which I think is pretty cool and something that I'll probably look at doing in the later stages of my portfolio. One thing that I commonly see in our space is, there's kind of this shift from the 9-to-5 job, transitioning that income into an asset base, and then, slowly growing that asset base and compounding that over time, and then pushing that into passive income side of things. But quite often it doesn't stop there. And a lot of people sort of transition into building this passion in property into a career or some other journey. What was it that sort of sparked that in for you? And when did that sort of transition come into play?
Yeah, I guess, so I did my last full-time employment when I was 33. So my wife, Heather, who she was also in the corporate world. So we were both working pretty long hours. We were both higher rate taxpayers when we were about 26 or something. So we paid a lot of tax. And I guess we basically just took a view that we've got a decent borrowing capacity. We were living in Sydney, and we basically just took the view that we would max out our borrowing capacity as much as we could when we were living in Sydney, and then take the plunge and go and do something else. And we just wanted to draw a line under that corporate career. So we went traveling for over a year, it was about 15 months or so. And then beyond that, then we started building new businesses and doing other things to generate cash flow. So that was my journey. There's different ways to do it. Sometimes people take the plunge earlier, other people it takes longer, but it's totally different working for yourself. And as you mentioned, above and beyond what I've done today, I've got a million ideas of what I want to do, loads of different business ideas in tech and prop tech and other things. So yeah, it's exciting to get to a point in life where you can actually display some more of your entrepreneurial efforts and skills, rather than in the corporate world, especially doing what I was doing as like in assurance and advisory, very narrow, very much sort of compliance-based work, which didn't really suit me.
Yeah, you're definitely doing a killer job in the property tech space at buyers. It's really starting to ramp up, and loving seeing everything that's happening over there, and you take that we're building out and everything else like that. So doing a killer job. And yeah, it's not until you take that time. I love that you actually took a fair bit of chunk of time off to go traveling. I think that's so important, because it's not until you take that time and have the time to sort of think about what it is that you want to do, that all these ideas start to pop up, and you get a little bit more clarity around things. Well, at least that's what I found anyway. So there's 1,001 different quotes that get thrown around in the property space. But if you had sort of a one favorite, either like property or investing one liner, what would it be?
Yeah, I think actually just on your points on travel there, I would massively recommend it to anyone who's thinking about it. We went to about 28 countries over 15 months. We really went for it. And I mean, I suppose the only downside is, now you've seen there's a big world out there. I want to go everywhere, but it does help you to really get a sense of perspective, in terms of, where do you want to live? What kind of lifestyle do you want? It also makes you appreciate just how lucky we are to be in a place like Noosa. You go to other parts of the world where there's just there's just no privilege by comparison. So yeah, strongly recommend dusting off the traveling shoes if you can. I think in terms of property quotes and one-liners, there's one that this goes back centuries by in America, a guy called William Penn Adair, who is well known for some pretty witty one-liners. And he said, find out where the people are moving and buy the land before they get there, which was a bit of a throwaway quip, I guess. But the thing is, the same thing actually applies today. And if you take the example of through the pandemic, a lot of people were moving to coastal locations because they wanted fresh air and space. And look at what's happened to real estate prices in the last 18 months for coastal markets. I think at the moment, a lot of the shifts internally are to Southeast Queensland. So again, if you find out where the people are going and get into those markets beforehand, while taking a long-term view, you won't go too far wrong with that. I grew up in a city and a region where all the coal mines were closing, the steel industry in Sheffield was closing, and the population was contracting. I mean, that is exactly the wrong dynamic for a real estate investor. You want people to be moving to where you're investing.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think, I mean, I could ask you all night for one-liners because I know you got a few up your sleeve, but I think that's fundamental. It's number one, it's got the land component to it, which I love. And then number two is, yeah, like where's the demand going, and get him before the demand gets there. But well, thanks for your time, Pete. You've really sort of clarified some things for me, that's for sure. And I love getting your sort of philosophy on building out a portfolio at the long term. As I've always said, I really appreciate that long-term view rather than sort of just buying for today. And I think you've reiterated that plenty of times today, but thanks for coming on, mate.
Pleasure. Thanks, Geordie. And yeah, always look forward to our catch-ups.
Talk to you soon, mate. Bye.